You're watching RT International live from Moscow with me, Nadira Tudor. Welcome to the programme. The Russian Defence Ministry has released radar data from the day of the MH17 passenger jet crash in eastern Ukraine back in 2014. The military says there are no signs of a missile being fired at the plane from the territory controlled by anti-government forces. With more, here's RT's Ilya Petrenko.
We've just heard from a Russian radar manufacturer at the Ministry of Defense. They uncovered primary radar data from their archive, and now Moscow says these findings are crucial for the MH17 investigation. Moscow is saying that investigators should definitely consider it. It shows that just before the MH17 tragedy, there were no aerial objects detected to the east of the Boeing that were capable of destroying the aircraft. According to the Ministry of Defense, that radar station in the Rostov region technically could not specify if there were any such objects from the west or the south side. Moscow says that Ukraine is in possession of that data and that also the U.S. could provide relevant satellite imagery that could help solve the case. All the latest findings will be handed over by the Russians to the Dutch investigators, and also Moscow is questioning Ukraine's reluctance to release their part of work.
The Ukrainian side has air situation data in the area of the crash from both civilian and military sources. The fact that Ukraine has not published radar data leads us to the conjecture the missile, if it was a Buk, was launched from territory under the control of the Ukrainian military.
Moscow keeps calling for a transparent and impartial investigation and hopes that the release of the radar data today would ensure similar commitment from other sides.
Now to talk more on the latest findings, I'm joined live by aviation expert Julian Bray. Julian, thanks for joining us here on RT International. Now, why do you think Ukraine is reluctant to publicly share its radar data from the day of the tragedy?
Well, I've got to look at this from a civilian point of view. I'm talking about civil aviation, and you're talking about the military. Now, of course, the military on all sides, and I'm saying the Russians, the Americans and the Ukrainians, all have secrets, if you like, that they wish to preserve. And so there's a certain amount of distrust between these parties. So somehow we have to get through this, because what we're talking about is actually bringing some peace and comfort to the families of those who perished aboard this aircraft. Now, we're quite certain it was actually brought down by something. What is in dispute at the moment is the exact location of where this missile was. So I think we've actually got past the blame game, if you like. We're now looking for some answers. And so there is a possible way forward. If an independent, shall we say, expert or arbiter was to receive all the information, have a look at it, and then redact it before it went into the committee, then that might be a way forward. I cannot see the various parties being free with their information because they'll say it will reveal too much. And so we have to work our way around this to try and get to the facts of the matter.
Julian, you're absolutely right. You know, the victims' families are looking for some kind of closure, and it's been over 2 years, hasn't it? So why has that not happened, your suggestion? Why hasn't it happened yet that there has been an independent investigative team working with those three countries who are reluctant to disclose full information to each other?
Well, I'm afraid that if you actually give part of a jigsaw, and I'm talking about the military side now, then it is possible to reverse engineer what you've got and try and find out exactly what they've got on the ground, in the air, and into outer space. Now, I'm quite certain that the Americans already know exactly who shot what and where it came from, because they have satellites whizzing around all the time, and they will actually have the data. But the problem is, if as a military person you reveal your information to other parties, then you negate the value of your particular military system. But here we're looking at a civilian aircraft, a civilian flight, and now, was it mistaken for a military transport and mistakenly shot down? This is what we ought to try and find out. So rather than apportion blame, we just want to get to the root of it. So I would call on all parties to find an independent expert give them the sight of the information and let them come to a conclusion, then send this on to the Dutch, who've done a really amazing job so far, so they can actually put the last final piece of the jigsaw into their particular puzzle.
Julian, you mentioned that, you know, the blame game should be over. You've mentioned that the Americans have satellite images, which is, of course, what they've used to blame Russia for shooting down the MH17, but they haven't provided the evidence of those images. And actually, again, going back to the fact that they are civilian victims, families that we're dealing with, why don't they provide the images and put an end to the debate if that's what they have, if they have the proof?
Well, that is the big $64,000 question, isn't it? Because if they do release what they've got, then perhaps they might actually reveal a little bit more than they actually meant to. Because the point is, nobody actually knows where all the positions of these satellites are. And to actually release the information, in my humble opinion, would actually pinpoint exactly where their strategic military satellite or observation point is. And that might have not have been clear to all other interested parties. And we're not just talking about Russia, Ukraine, but we're talking worldwide. There are lots of other, shall we say, unhappy people in the world who dearly love to know these secrets. So somehow we need to find a way of divorcing the military side from the civil side. It's an interesting situation, but I think it's gone on long enough now, and I think the families do require some answers. And I take my hats off to the Russians for what they've done so far, and hopefully other people will now bring their information to the table.
Julian Bray, aviation expert, thank you very much for your expertise and joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.